Okay. Let's see if we have any audio. Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Today we are going to be talking about the separation between the rich and the poor and how it is that the working class individual really just doesn't stand a chance any longer. And I know this is very difficult for a lot of people to hear. And I actually get a lot of people who will come back and say, dude, you're just nothing but a gloom and doomer. But that's not what I am trying to do here. What I am trying to do is share with you a better understanding of what it is that's taken place within our economy so that you can have a better understanding of what it is that you need to do with yourself, because the things that are taking place right now are causing some serious pain and suffering to a lot of individuals out there who really just don't understand what it is that's taking place. They are essentially a victim of their circumstances, having grown up in what would be a traditional household. Now, yes, we have sound. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay. And so, as a lot of us had grown up in the traditional household, thinking that if we go out there and we work a regular job, like just go out there and just figured out a good, honest job, and we were working that job and we were to be very disciplined at that job, we would be able to have what would be considered somewhat close to the American dream, being able to acquire a house and a car and have something that would be reasonable to a retirement. And now that is simply gone. It's not available to the average working class individual. You may find somewhere, sometime, there might be some job in a location that does work out okay for somebody. But for the most part, you're going to find that it's going to be a very difficult task going into the future. And it comes down to consumption. It really is a consumer economy that we are suffering with now. We used to be a producer saver economy, way different. So when you think about when it was we had that high standard of living, the American dream, we were a producing saving economy where we would produce the world's greatest stuff and send it out there to the world, and the world would send us their money. And back in the day, it used to be gold. And if you had a bunch of people sending you a bunch of gold, what do you think is going to happen to your standard of living? It's most likely going to elevate. Now, it was that elevation in consumption. That was the working class. The working class individual was the consumer. When you increased your wages, when you increased your pay, when you increased your productivity, you increased the consumption, and the consumption was coming from the working class individual who was going out there working hard, acquiring those great things, and then buying a house, buying the couch, buying the TV, buying all the things for the household, right? These were the consumers. Now, if you go and you look, who is the consumer now? It's the top 10 to 20% of household incomes. Now, here's something that's very interesting. I'm not really big into numbers, and here on the Uneducated Economist, we already know that FASB 56 already said that they are going to feed you some lies for national security reason when it comes to the numbers, but whatever. When you look at the GDP and how much of GDP is down to consumption, it's like 70%. 70% of the gross domestic product comes down to consumption alone. And when you think about the consumer, who is it that's a consumer? It's the top 10 to 20% of households. So I did some very brief internet research, and what I mean by that is I used AI to ask the question, how much of the top 10 to 20% of household incomes represents GDP? And now when you think about the top 10 to 20% of households that are doing anywhere from 50 to 70% of the consumption, and the GDP is somewhere around 70% consumption, that brings it down. I know this is weird. That brings it down to somewhere around 35%. 10% of household incomes represents about 35% of GDP. So I asked the question, how much does 70%, the bottom 70% of household incomes, how much of GDP do they represent? 25%. 25% versus 35%. 70% of the people have to increase their consumption by a dramatic magnitude. I couldn't even imagine how much they would have to increase their consumption in order to just get to the same comparable number that the top 10% are doing. And so when you think about what the top 10% are doing for consumption, to increase consumption, which would then be to increase GDP, would it be easier to get 70% of the people to increase all their consumption in a significant way? Or would it be easier to get the top 10% of household incomes to increase their consumption, to increase GDP? You see why you're not mattering here? Why, like, the working class individual is simply not a component. You have to drive the truck, you have to serve the beers, you have to do all the flipping of the burgers and, loading of the lumber, right? All that part makes the economy function. But ultimately, your significance within the consumer portion of the GDP is very, very low. In fact, it's almost non-existent. When you start getting into where the top bottom 50% of household incomes, how much they are actually participating inside of the consumption, inside of GDP, it's almost none. Everything is literally concentrated to the top 10%. Top 1% of household incomes do so much consumption, it represents anywhere from 10 to 15% of GDP. If you wanted to increase GDP, who do you really have to focus in on? See, this is one of the reasons why you know that the wedge of inequality is going to get worse, because there is literally nothing that can be done to increase GDP, to increase the economic activity within the working class in such a significant fashion that it would actually change the number. You literally are no longer part of it. However, the ability to get the top 10% or even the top 1% to increase their wealth in order for them to go out there and do the consumption, because they're doing the real consumption anyway, is pretty easy to do. You see how the problem's now suffering through the working class individual just falling further and further away? Look at all the articles that I leave down in the description of this video. Like article after article after article describing the same thing over and over and over again that this guy was describing hundreds of years ago. Cantillon effect. It's pretty easy to recognize once you see it. It's obvious. It literally couldn't be anything else other than the expansion of new money, because this is what happens. See, I love it when people start to blame the politics of it, because all the politics are symptoms of ever increasing amounts of new money. Those people wouldn't be able to act, behave, or do what it is that they are doing if it wasn't for the fact that the new money is poured in. Now, a lot of people can blame the new money on the politics, but here's the problem, is you're accepting it. You accept it every single day, and you're like, I don't have any choice. You do. You have the choice. You choose to use it just like everybody else does. And because you're choosing to use it, they are able to continue on with their power. Right? It's like, basically allow them to have the whip. You don't have to allow them to have it. You choose to. And this is what's so funny about it, is that people don't think that they have any other choice in the matter. They very much do. And because they don't recognize it, and most people won't, this is one of the reasons why we're going to find the problem getting worse. There's no way they're going to bring your job back. Your job's not coming back. Once it's gone forever. It's like your favorite girlfriend in your life you've ever had that you absolutely love. Once she's gone forever. She ain't coming back. All right? Once you understand how it is that the pain and suffering of what it is that has taken place is not going to be something that is relieved by any kind of political decision out there, they can't do it. And the reason why they can't do it is because they would literally have to end their own wealth. They would have to end their ability to acquire more in their life, and they won't make that decision. They will make every single decision that they possibly can to try and give you some sort of relief or benefit or help or whatever it is they can possibly do, so long as it doesn't hurt them first. Because the moment it hurts them, they'll say, oh, nah, man, self-preservation kicking in. I got to protect mine. Like, how can I help you if I don't have mine? And because they want theirs, they want the wealth, they want the ever-increasing amounts of interest rate acquiring more wealth, they're going to make it very, very difficult for the average everyday person to acquire what it is that they need in order to have what would have been considered the average standard everyday American life. That falls further and further away from the capabilities. It's sad to see it. Right? And now that you recognize what it is that's happening, you can think, okay, well, what is it that I got to do here? Right? Because you know that if you're going to work hard for a living, then you're going to end up suffering the consequences of that job providing less and less and less into the future. You know what's going to happen, right? Now, we can get mad about it. We can blame the politicians for it. We can get really angry and make videos that get everybody else really angry about it. But at the end of the day, does that change anything about it? Right? See, we're going to have to recognize that there's a lot of ways out there that money can be made. It's not just from our job anymore. We have side hustles that we can do. There's online sales that you can do. There's all kinds of businesses that can be started. See, it's not a matter of society providing you with a decent existence. See, I don't know where that comes from. Society doesn't owe you anything like that. You got a chance. Society owes you a shot at it, just like everybody else, right? And if you happen to be unaware or, for a lack of better terms, ignorant to the capabilities of what it is that you have provided to you within this country, then you're probably going to suffer the consequences of it. But you do realize that there's people out there who are absolutely killing it right now, starting from zero. They can kill it right now with everything that we have going on, including the problems that you're talking about. It's not going to be the way you want it to be. It's going to be the way it is. And the way it is a very difficult task for the average everyday working class individual to then suffer through. But once you recognize what it is that you have available to you, how it is that you can position yourself to acquire more in your life beyond that of your day job, to secure a rate of interest beyond that of your occupation, once you recognize that these are the people who eventually become property owners, then you can start working down that path. It's not going to happen overnight. It's probably not going to even happen in a week or 2 weeks or months or years or decades. But if you live that life in that existence over time, you might be able to hand something off to the next generation who can then run with the energy and abilities that you have provided for them. Because this is how it works. See, you think back in the day, think long time ago, man. If you were born to somebody who made hats, right? And the hat maker was a very important job. And there wasn't a whole lot of people who made hats. And he showed you, your dad or your family showed you how to make hats. Like the whole family made these hats. And that's what you were into, was making these hats. Well, if you didn't know anything else, right, then what was it that you were going to do? What if another hat maker came in? What if you lost the ability to sell your hats? What if the hats weren't wanted? Now you got problems. Well, how many people out there are saying that's the exact same thing? It was just like, man, how come my hat making skills, my abilities aren't cutting it anymore? You see how it is that this is the same effort that is going to go into the future, or how far in the past you go, it's going to be the same thing. What is it that my skills can provide? How much understanding do I have of what it is that's taken place in order to acquire the most, the abundance? It doesn't matter what it is that you grew up in. It doesn't matter, and none of it matters what it is that you're complaining about or think is holding you back, as much as you want it to be. And if you want it to be that, then that's what it'll be. It'll hold you back, and then you'll suffer the consequences of that. But to know that the abilities to go out there and acquire whatever it is that you want in your life is very much present right here and right now is so more abundant today than it has ever been, that there's no reason to rely on a working job. Right? There's nothing wrong with it. I work an hourly job just like everybody else I know. All right? 9 to 5 job, 5 days a week with side hustles make it 7 days a week for me. I know what it is to live that life. I'm not somebody who's super fancy out there who's like raking in hundreds of millions of dollars on YouTube, taking sponsorships and everything else. I'm out here struggling just like everybody else is, but I position myself in a way that it doesn't really feel like a struggle. I keep my expenses incredibly low because I don't drive new cars, right? I don't have a whole lot of fancy things in my life that then causes me to have a lot of expenses in my life. I keep that very low. I try to keep as much flow coming into my life so that I can position that money to a secure rate of interest beyond that of my occupation, because this is the stuff that I'm learning from this guy Cantillon from back in the day that separates the rich from the poor. Now I understand what it is that's happening out there. I can't have all the wonderful things that I would have thought that the money that I am making would be able to provide, because if I did, then I would end up sinking into the abyss. It's an unfortunate consequences of what we live now today. But because I recognize what it is that's happening out there, it also gives me the ability to use what it is that we have. When I was younger, we didn't have the ability to just go out there and use Cash App to buy stocks. That wasn't a thing. All right? That wasn't a real thing. Could you buy into the stocks? Sure, but you had to have a broker. You had to use a significant amount of money. It wasn't available to the average working everyday individual. Right? But now it is. And you wonder why it is that asset holders are doing so much better than the working class individuals, because the working class individual can make themselves an asset holder just as easy as anybody else could have. That wasn't something that was available back in the day, but that is available today. So you wonder what it is that's going on out there when I look through these articles. Like all these articles that I leave down in the description, every single one of them, I look for it. It was just like, talk about the Cantillon effect. Just say it. Just say it. Richard Cantillon talked about it hundreds of years ago that if you pour this new money into the economy, you're going to have a separation between the rich and the poor. And every single one of those people who are delivering the message won't accept the fact that it's their own fault. Their own luxurious experience is the reason why we have the problem. Okay? That's why I laugh about it. It was just like even the people who are out there showing off, like, look at the horribleness of this Portland politics that have created all the wretched homelessness and all the terribleness that you see around here, and then they go and get in their Mercedes, right? And I'm like, okay, whatever, bro. You know, how many vehicles do you own? What kind of house do you live in? How many vacations do you take? What kind of life do you live? One of luxury, I bet. Right? You don't drive a 97 Suburban, do you? See, this is the problem that most people face is they don't even understand that it's their own existence. They want to help. They're bleeding heart. Like they totally want to help. And I totally get that they want to help. But the idea that they want to help while doing it from a Mercedes is like, might as well just, I don't know what you're doing. You're not going to help. That ain't going to help. You're going to actually cause the problem to get worse. So, go get back in your car again and just, might as well just throw the money out the window. Right? And that's the unfortunate consequence of the Cantillon effect. Is that the idea of not having the inequality means that people cannot get into luxuries. They can't buy into the luxurious experience. If they do, the inequality will be manifested on account of it. So as the people who are driving their new trucks around and they're all happy about it, and don't get me wrong, my dad has a new truck and I'm driving. I drove it today, right? It's not a matter of buying into it and saying, oh man, he's the problem with it. It's by buying into it and then causing the problem and then blaming it on something else. That's the problem. Like recognizing that you're doing it is different. It was just like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to buy the new truck and I'm sorry that it's going to create this inequality. It's an unfortunate circumstances of ever increasing amounts of new money that pour into the system. Maybe you should work hard, postpone your expenditures, secure a rate of interest beyond that of your occupation so you can become a property owner so you can buy a new truck too. Okay. But in the meantime, away we go. And off goes the inequality and the luxurious experiences that are going to come from it. Don't try and like, I don't know why people try to stop it. That's what I get really like, like trying to stop it is futile. All right? It's futile. It's not going to happen. It's absolutely not going to happen. Right? And even if it did, everybody falls into pain and misery. So regardless, right? You're going to have a certain group who's going to suffer pain and misery. And then after it's all said and done, everybody falls into pain and misery. So if you want it to end now, let's do it, I guess, right? And if you just want the pain and misery to suffer across everybody, let's go for it. Turn the new money off. Otherwise, expect more of the same, right? Those are the two paths that we can go down. We can expect more of the same, where we have the inequality and the wretched homelessness and the drug use and the problems that come from all that because of the depression and horridness that, we get from it all, or everybody can fall into that. Those are the two paths. Recognizing why it's happening is important for you because you choose what side you're going to be on. Not society, not the politicians, not greedy corporations, not your family. Nobody. You do. And the money people will end up using their family as the excuse, and I totally get why, but it's still your decision to do it. And right down to choosing to use the dollar, keeping the dollar as a savings. That's your choice. And if you lose your purchasing power on it, that's because you thought that it was a savings. The dollar is not a savings. The dollar is currency. It's meant to trade goods and services for other goods and services. When you recognize it as that and not as a savings, then you don't expect it to have a savings, and then it can do whatever it wants. You don't care, right? Does it suck that there's inflation? Sure, right? But if you recognize what inflation is, then you don't really keep your money in that anyhow, and you keep it in assets that are going to inflate with the inflation. That's how asset holders do it. And that's why they're doing so much better than the person who is saying, how come my paycheck doesn't buy enough food anymore? It's because you rely on the paycheck, which doesn't buy as much anymore as we go into the future because the working class individual is falling down the line. And there's nothing you can do about it. Cantillon described it hundreds of years ago that that's what would take place. So, what are you going to do? All right. Let me read some comments here. I'm just kind of babbling on for 20 minutes. I really just wanted to share all those articles with you guys and just kind of show how it is that people are recognizing the Cantillon effect through the symptoms, but they don't recognize it as, the actual cause, right? They look at all these symptoms and say, oh, look at all these problems that we are now facing. And I'm thinking, yeah, bring it all back. Bring it all back to what? New money and luxurious experiences. New money and luxurious experiences. And they won't say it. They won't confess to it because they probably really don't realize it, that it's their own fault. And they're like, oh man, what's the problem here? It was like your new truck is the new problem, right? And and I get it, like I see it, and I don't expect it to go away. I expect that issue to get worse as we go into the future, and I don't consider it a problem. I just consider it the result of ever increasing new money. And it's going to suck for a lot of people out there. Not for those who recognize it. And that's what I'm trying to share on this channel. All right, 170 people. Let's keep hitting that thumbs up button. Let's get more people to join in. It's all a cycle. AI can change anything. If deflation come, most assets can go so much down in value. Yeah. And the working individual loses it all. Like they have to take ever increasingly less hourly wages in order to find a job, if they can even find a job during a deflation. Go and look at China right now. China's suffering the consequences of deflation. Right? Here they are. They keep trying to expand their money supply, and they keep suffering through a deflationary scenario. Right? Because they are getting their money in through the production, through factory jobs. And not because that factory jobs are being depleted through less commerce actually taking place, and the fact that factories are moving over from China to Vietnam and Mexico and other places. The dollar system, or the new money that's coming into their country, is coming in through debt issuance, which we already know is a losing battle. They were getting their new money in through production, which was actually growing their economy in a strong way. That's all gone now. Don't smoke or drink your money away. Absolutely. Sig 226. Sig 226. I totally agree with that. There's really, you have to think about where it is that you're putting your money every single time. Every time you buy a cup of coffee, every single time you're going to the movies, every time you're doing something that doesn't really provide you with any kind of return, then that's money that's gone forever and that you have to work for again. And I'm not saying that you don't enjoy life, like don't go to the movies, don't listen to music, don't do anything. Like, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that if you are not putting a significant amount of money away so that you can enjoy some of those other things, then you are going to end up suffering the consequences of it. The less you enjoy those other things, the more you're going to enjoy the better experience that you get from being an asset holder once you have accumulated enough of it. Like postponing expenditures to secure a rate of interest beyond that of your occupation. Direct words from the Cantillon effect or from the Cantillon essay. That's it. Those people who do that will eventually become property owners. Then they live independently of the state. That's the process. There was a time in this country you could just work. You could just work because we had a time and it was a moment in time in this economy that was a beautiful moment where it was just enough of the factory jobs putting out those wonderful products to produce that money that came like produce that wonderful stuff that brought that money in so that we could raise that standard of living. That was a very short opportunity, right? It's something that Cantillon describes. This is what happens with industrious people. They rise in their manufacturing capabilities. They eventually raise their standard of living. Once they have done that, the problem of foreign competition starts to come in. We experienced that here. He describes it hundreds of years ago. There's no reason to blame anything else other than the luxurious experience of the people who were industrious, who raised their standard of living and wanted to enjoy that new money. That's it. Like, it's simple to understand. We can complicate it with all kinds of the symptoms that we see as a result of it, but that's what's going on. And the more we enjoy the luxurious experiences, I mean, think about it. How expensive is it to buy a car now? They're luxurious vehicles. They're super fancy. Nobody can work on them. They're high tech, computer linked to everything else out there in the world. And I can't even describe it, how, advanced they are. How is it that they could possibly get any cheaper going into the future for the average working day individual who's flipping burgers? They couldn't possibly do it. Like, how do you trade enough burger flipping to buy one of these fancy cars? You can't. But can you imagine back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, how you could flip burgers enough to buy a car? See, your buddy who didn't flip burgers, he went down to the wrecking yard. He got himself a wrecker, a junker, took it home, twisted the wrenches on it while you were flipping burgers. And at the end of summer, you took your savings from flipping burgers and he took his effort from working on the car and he swapped. You paid him for the car, and you had a car now from your flipping burgers, and he had a bunch of money from working on the car. And that's how things used to operate. So people could have vehicles. It didn't like a couple of kids could figure out how to get themselves some cars because cars were something that people could work on. Now they don't work on them because they're too fancy, they're too expensive. So when people say, "Oh, back in the day, a car used to only cost this much, and today they're this much," they're like, "Yeah, no kidding. Look at what they are." There's some fancy ass vehicle that nobody knows how to work on anymore. You imagine the tooling you need to work on a car. I mean, it's just incredible. You can't just do it with a socket set anymore. And this is how it goes. Right? Eventually, the people who were sitting there going, "Man, how come it was when I had a regular job, or my dad had this same job, he was able to provide for the entire family, and I can't even really rent an apartment with it." Right? And it was just like, right. Think about what it is that you are trying to trade. He was trading back in the day his time and skills for somebody who could go out and get a wrecker and put a car on the road, and he could trade that for his time and effort for that car. Today, you don't have that same person to trade your time and effort for, do you? The only person you have your time and effort you can trade with is another burger flipper. You see what's happened here? Like, this is the reason why the lower class, the working class, is falling away. They don't participate anymore. Everybody else who's participating are the ones who have the assets. The one who have the stocks, the bonds, the real estate, the businesses, all that other stuff that's going on up there. They're the ones who are actually acquiring the money that can go out there and spend into the economy. That working class individual back in the day from like the 50s and 60s who was like the powerhouse going into the 70s, even 80s and 90s, there was probably still, a good section of it. But after that, it was over, especially after the great financial crisis. That sealed the deal. Like the great financial crisis sealed the deal on it. It was never going to return again. Yeah. All right, let's read through some of these comments. I'm just babbling on so much here. Okay. Let me grab my glasses here. Children are expensive. Actually, that's what's funny about it. Where are the population of what nations have the biggest like children population growth? Poverty-stricken nations, right? Not the advanced nations. They're suffering with, so it's not the children are expensive. You don't have to have money to have kids. In fact, it's better to have no money because then you can have lots and lots of kids. And you don't believe me? Just look at history, right? Look at all of history and look at right now, even current circumstances. Every poverty-stricken nation out there suffers with a lot of childbirth, high birth rates. Uh-huh. Not that I mean, they probably have a high mortality rate along with it, but it doesn't matter. They have a lot of kids, and the reason is that if you have advanced your living standards and you have an elevated living standard, the last thing you want to do is lose that living standard. And kids are expensive, and so you lose it. You have to sacrifice. I can't go drive a new Suburban. I have to drive the old 97 Suburban because I have a couple of boys that I'm trying to get into life. Right? So in the meantime, I have to cut back. So I have to deplete my standard of living. I can't drive the new car. I have to drive the old car. And people don't want to do that. So in high standard living societies, it's very difficult to have children because it depletes your standard of living. But if you're living in poverty, you can have as many kids as you want because it doesn't deplete your standard of living any. You're already living in poverty. How worse can it get? I mean, other than death, then what difference does it make, right? You can have as many kids as you want. And that, again, you guess who talked about it, right? Cantillon. He was the one who actually says it. Like populations can be carried the furthest where people are willing to live off of the least amount of the land. Let me see if I can find it. It is like this guy describes everything. This dude nailed everything from back in the day. He broke it down for everybody to understand. And because he was talking about horses and wagons, and today we have cell phones and airplanes, people just don't give it any kind of consideration. And that's too bad because this dude really, really knew what the hell he was talking about when he talked about the economic forces. It doesn't matter if you are talking about gold or bill scripts or fiat currency or anything else. It all kind of goes down the same way when you have injection of new money, right? Does the problem get exponentially worse and far out of reach when you have this amount of new money coming in? Yeah, I mean, it's going to get stupid ridiculous when you see how much is out there and what it is that the people have done with it. But the idea that the underlying economic forces are any different is wrong. They are the exact same. If you inject new money into the system, ever increasing amounts of foreign production are going to come in, ever increasing amounts of domestic manufacturers are going to leave, ever increasing amounts of separation between the rich and the poor, and it all has to do to luxurious consumption. That's it. Right? That's it. Every single time. Where is that whole population thing? The increase and decrease of the number of the people in the state. Page 85. Okay. Page 85. This is good stuff, guys. Everybody should read Cantillon essay on economic theory. Right? And if you have never read anything on economics and you don't plan on reading anything on economics, and there was just one thing that you were ever going to take in chapters 6, 7, and 8, the increase and decrease of money to the state, part 2 of the essay, right? If there was nothing else in the entire world you ever read, just read those 3 chapters, right? Read those three chapters, internalize it, and I swear to God, it'll change your life. Okay. This is it. The increase of population can be carried furthest in the countries where the population are content to live the most poorly and to consume the least production of the soil. In countries where all peasants and laborers are accustomed to eating meat and drinking wine, beer, etc., not many inhabitants can be supported. And that hasn't changed. It hasn't changed one little bit. In poverty stricken nations, you can carry the population much further than you can in advanced civilizations or advanced populations or high standard of living because people do not want to deteriorate their standard of living. And that's weird to think. You think if you have the money, you would want to be able to have the kids, but that's not it. It's the exact opposite of that. As soon as you have the money, you don't want the kids. Even if you want the kids, you would much rather not have the kids than to deteriorate your way of existence. And this is what's sad about it is that most people don't realize that their kids are probably one of the most valuable things that they could ever have in their life, especially when they get old, right? Having good, healthy, educated, financially secure, smart kids, whatever, that is probably one of the most rewarding, wealthy, richest things that an individual could ever possibly have in their life. And the more money they get, the least that they go for it. Isn't that crazy? Right? See, this is why everything is counterintuitive to what you thought it was. Everything is, especially when it comes to economics and monetary policy. Uh, a lot of overgrown children masquerading as adults these days. Yeah, and I kind of get that. Yeah. I see it a lot out there, and it's because of literally how easy it is for people to live nowadays. Uh, oh, thank you, All Nighter, for the links, for posting the links, man. I really appreciate you, brother. We live in a deflationary system with technology. Having kids feels like a gamble these days due to the potency of new drugs. Yeah, you gotta. I mean, that's what's crazy about it is like you can do your best to raise your kids right, and you never know what they're gonna end up turning out like. I remember like some buddies in watching in school and stuff like that, and I thought, man, these guys never have a chance. And some of them turned out to be some of the greatest professionals you could ever imagined. And I'm thinking to myself, man, off of the existence that you had growing up, that's pretty incredible. And then other ones had the greatest shots in the world and just totally blew it, you know. I lived like that for 3 years on the sales of my plasma. As I went to college, I used the saved up 12K per year of college loans and a Vets VA home loan to create my first boarding house. Interesting. Okay. See, this is the type of stuff that ends up coming up. Makes me want to just do members only stuff. Okay. True, Iran, that's why using an inflationary currency at odds with reality is so destructive. It's deflationary because the scales have tipped to the consumption over production. Everyone wants to have fun without the work. Yeah, and I think that's just a matter of, I think that that was just a matter of time. So long as the new money was going to be introduced into the economy, eventually that's the results of it. Because the more new money that you're bringing in, the less production you're doing yourself, right? So unless you are producing the real goods and services, then you're buying those goods and services from a foreign producer out there, right? And as the foreign production is coming in, the less you're actually producing and working, then more of like the results of laziness, I guess, is what you're going to end up seeing. Like, if you can imagine, I mean, if you can imagine back in the day where like you had the Great Depression going on and people weren't working at all and it was very difficult and somebody was offered a job, how hard they would have worked that job. Because if they didn't work it as hard as they possibly could, there was going to be somebody else who was going to attempt to do it harder than they did. All right. So they had to do it as hard as they possibly could have. Well, now you're like, there, nobody cares. Like nobody cares about their retail job. Nobody cares about doing a good job because ultimately they're like they don't really have any competition out there. There's like nobody's going to work any harder than they are. All you have to do is just show up. You show up every day, you're not a pain, you don't steal, you're safe. Like if you show up and you're safe, on time, clean, and you don't steal, that's it. You're like a hero in you're a hero in the working class and spot. Like literally, all you have to do is those five things. You don't even have to have any skills or anything else. Just showing up on time, being safe, not stealing, you know, being clean. That's it, man. And you are like at the top of the game. I'm not joking. Think about that. So back in the day when people were working hard, factory producing things, like if they didn't work it, somebody else would, hey, I'll do that. I'll do it twice as hard as that guy does for half the price. Right? But now there ain't nobody to compete with. So all you have to do is just show up, be clean, don't steal, right? Be on time. And sober. Yeah. Kind of relative. Race to the bottom. I've seen, yeah, plenty of times they're not sober from the night before, man. All right. I heard in the Mill City, Oregon during the Great Depression, people shared shifts and spread the hours out at mills so everyone could get some work. Huh? Universal basic income, rocket ship to inequality. Universal basic income is probably one of the worst ideas that you can go out there for the problems that we now face today of inequality. Don't get me wrong, the initiation of it will be a beautiful moment for those who receive it. Like we're like, woo, look at it, party time, right? Look how awesome this is as it comes into the economy. But as that money starts to float in, what you're going to find is that here's the thing. If you are poor and you don't have money, who does? Like if you were handed money and now you don't have that money, where did it go? When we got all the stimulus checks out there and the inequality shrank just by a little bit for just a brief moment, it was actually able to squeeze that wedge down for just a second. What ended up happening? The poor took the money that shrank the inequality and gave it right back to the rich, who then set themselves on a rocket ship to inequality and went even further up the line. Because poor people don't manage money well. That's why they're poor. Now, it's not their fault. It is, but most likely they're a victim of their circumstances, and that's unfortunate for them, but it's still their fault for letting go of the money. They did not put it towards a secure rate of interest beyond that of their occupation. Because of that, if you give them more new money, what's going to happen? They're going to let it go and it's going to go to the rich again. And I don't care how much you tax the rich, they are going to end up with it while the poor sink further and further away from them as they go on the rocket ship of inequality. New money will do this every single time. There's zero doubt in my mind. And I don't care all the creative financing and government interactions and all the other stuff you want to attempt to do. If it's new money coming in, inequality will be the result. And if you give it to the poor first, what are they going to do? They're going to hand it right back to the rich. You don't believe me? Just look at the past few years. That's exactly what they did with it. They took it, they're like, here, don't let this go. Be smart with this. Let the inequality shrink. Inequality came down. They're like, nah, here you go. You can have it. And they go, there it went. And they were like, oh, man, damn political officials out there, damn banking system. I mean, I'm not trying to blame the victim. I'm just calling it the way it is. This is the reality of the situation. I know, right? I was very poor. At one point in my life, 40 years old, drunk, in debt, had $20,000 in debt on a credit card. Credit cards, right? Like, I mean, I had it bad. in a very bad position. I looked at that and I was like, man, this is not working out. What am I doing wrong here? One of those things I realized was like, man, I am drinking way too much. I gave up drinking and I started paying off my debts. And guess what? When you get out of debt, everything changes. Now, when I got out of debt, I could have easily taken on more debt by buying cars, fancy things, or doing whatever it would be that most people would do when they have a bunch of money. And instead, I saved as much as I could so I could buy a house. All right. See, became industrious person, secure, putting my money towards a secure rate of interest beyond that of my occupation until I was eventually becoming a property owner. This is exactly what Cantillon described hundreds of years ago. There is no difference today. Uh-huh. All right, 92 likes. Keep hitting that like button. I hope everybody's enjoying the video. All right, sitting here with you like being with a good friend back in the day, exchanging ideas and sharing opinions. Well, I appreciate it. I hope that's what everybody is feeling within the chat section right now. The comments are the Uneducated Economist YouTube channel are the best. All right. She is poor because of what she wears. Okay. Imagine if people took their stimulus checks and bought silver. Some of them did. Simon lost his silver in an unfortunate boating accident. I did. Dude, that was such a sad story, man. I couldn't believe, like, you would think you would be smarter with it than to, like, but anyway, the river seemed calm, but it changes very quickly. And, those swells, they could come out of nowhere. And really, the boat just kind of rode up. Stuff just flew everywhere. And man, I was like, and that was it. It was gone. Like, how do you get it back? I mean, I guess, maybe you could lucky, try and magnet fish for it or something like that. But, you know, if the damn container deteriorates, that's it. Gone forever. Oh well. Life goes on. All right. Part of the Canadians know like Canadian woke government. Oh. Things can be replaced. They can. Yeah. It's the Edmonds Fitzgerald. Boats are dangerous. They are. All right. Do we have any do we want to break anything down? Questions, comments? Units of measurements have already been established and ready for a rollout. Deja vu. Thank you so much for the emails, Deja. Betsy, porn people indulge in shrimp videos. Ugh. All right. Moving on. I kind of feel that food and energy are the future. Well, ultimately, Cantillon describes wealth as food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. And so, really, it all comes down to food. Food is it. And when you really think about it, if you are starving, nothing else matters. Like, you'll give up all the gold, everything else, if you are starving and about ready to die. And it doesn't take very long. Right? Like, it doesn't take very long of having no food in your life before you will start just really getting desperate. And most likely just give up everything that you own. And so food is everything. Security to food. After that, conveniences and pleasures of life, like those are very much lesser of a scale compared to food, right? Conveniences like having a bed, having a car, these are pretty nice conveniences in life. And a lot of times when you really think about it, most people will turn those into the most luxurious experiences when you think about what it is that you have for a necessity in your life. So food, conveniences, and then pleasures of life. Like, pleasures of life can be really anything. That's your matter of your opinion. And since most people find pleasure out of like spending money on pleasurable things, that's usually why it ends up being like people who have money are wealthy or whatever because they have the food, the conveniences, and pleasures of life. But I think about it in that fashion: food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. That's it. That is the only thing to wealth. And when you really think about it, that can be abundant as hell. All the wealth in the world is abundant as hell. Food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. It's up to you to figure that out. How is it that you position yourself to acquire those things? Most people do it very desperately, like work 9 hours, like 9 hours every single day, or 10 or 12 hours every single day, whatever you're trying to say. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you're desperately working very hard to acquire these things in life. Well, other people are like, man, I have all the food I can want. Like, I don't rely on anybody for food. I garden, I do whatever, I produce, I trade. I got all the food I want. I'm not worried about it. Conveniences? Like, again, that's up to you. What is it that you have in your life that you need for convenience? Like, if you have a vehicle and that's more of a convenience than you could ever possibly imagine, think about what it is that people have in their life to try and make convenient that's beyond just a car. Like, if you can eliminate the car out of your life where you don't even need the convenience of that, like, everything is convenience. The amount of convenience in your life is just like it's everywhere and accessible to you when you really think about it. Pleasures of life. 100% opinion. Pleasures of life is not something you can put a price tag on. I think about what it is to be wealthy. You put a ribeye in front of me while I have a view and there's some nice live music going on in the background. That's it. 100%. That's it, man. I don't need anything else. That's like about as wealthy as it could possibly get for me. I don't know what it could like. You could dress it up, make it fancier, do whatever you want with it, but it doesn't get any better than that's it. Good food, a view, music. I'm done. All right. Everybody else can complicate it with more stuff. And that's the unfortunate problem that we have, is that people really enjoy luxurious things. And so therefore we have luxurious stuff. We have nice cars. We have nice buildings. We have nice scenery and pools and, patios and fancy things to hang out on that don't provide anything other than relaxation, pleasurable experiences. And because people enjoy that stuff so much, we get to have it in our life. Right? It's an awesome and evil all at the same time. uh, how many thin women are in Oregon? Ah, yeah, fat, skinny, all good. All right. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Well, I guess that's true. A cool buzz, some tasty waves, and I'll be fine. I love that. You guys know what movie that's from, right? Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He said, Spicoli, when are you going to get a job? What for? You need money. Oh, not me. All I need is some tasty waves, a cool buzz, and I'll be fine. And I'm fine. And then the dude comes busting in to rob the place, and he throws the coffee in his face. It was awesome, man. That was a great movie. I'm going to watch that tonight. Best Times at Ridgemont High. Booze and smokes are currency for the end of the world. 50% of the U.S. are obese. We got so gross people here for real. Depends on when you were bought them. The average Joe doesn't appreciate how important potash is in mass food production. A lot of the stocks are on sale now. The people of the future will call us wasters. Our children call them boomers. We're all useless eaters. Classic for sure. Please watch They Lived, Simon. All right. Not obese, but Eek. Alright, they don't film them like that anymore. No, they really don't. Uh, I'm just cruising back up here a little ways here just to see some of these comments. Or is it, I quit smoking since the COVID shutdown. The juice is just not worth the squeeze anymore. I make more money just selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace than I did being a temp welder at $12 an hour. Yeah, I had a buddy who hustled stuff off of the internet. He would basically just flip things and made quite a bit of money doing it. Like, I mean, cars, generator, didn't matter what it was. It was like anything. He would just find stuff that he found undervalued, make him a ridiculously low deal on it, and like 1 out of 100 would take it, and he would snap up on something that was way underpriced because it doesn't like. Here's what's so funny about it. As a salesman, I totally get it. Most people have a hard time recognizing it, but you don't make money when you buy, when you sell. You make money when you buy. All right? You make money on the buy. When you find undervalued deals out there, that's when you make the money. You get those things and then you sell them for a regular price or even for a discounted price and still make some money off of it because you make money when you buy it, not when you sell. You got to buy it low. Chicken eggs are the answer to cheap protein. Maybe. Um, did you see tech bubble pop in the near future? Do I see tech? I mean, I guess I could, but really, I don't know. Like the whole bubble, like everything bubble. Like I was reading about the everything bubble, what, like 15 years ago. And they were like, everything's in a bubble. It's gonna pop soon. It's gonna pop, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, what's going on here is something that's different. See, recessionary pressures from the past would come from the lack of consumption, right? See, this is why people see it different. This is why I don't. This is Here's another reason why I was able to call out the recessionless recession, and it wasn't. And I'm starting to clear it. It's becoming clearer to me now. And although I was suspicious of it in the past, and I was trying to call it out with what it is that I could see, what I am getting from it now is much different from what it was that I was seeing back when I was calling it out, even though what I was calling out was very accurate to the description. It wasn't the complete picture, right? And so now to understand like the recessionless recession, and what I was saying is that you would see unemployment rise, but not significantly, even though you had a bunch of companies going bankrupt. And ultimately, as these companies were going bankrupt, they were letting go of their $150,000 employee, and those people had have to go to work flipping burgers, even though it wasn't a good job, it was a job. And if you're having a job, you're not unemployed. So this is one of the reasons why unemployment didn't rise significantly, even though we had this massive layoffs and bankruptcies and stuff like that taking place. So I called that part out years ago, right? And that's what I was calling the recessionless recession. I feel I was very accurate when it came to that description of that and calling that part out. What I was not necessarily grasping is what we are getting today, and that is that the consumer itself doesn't necessarily land down at the working class anymore, right? In fact, I'm convinced that there is no longer a consumer at the working class. They consume, they do like 25, 30% of the consumption. They're a significant portion of GDP, but not in a way that then changes the outcome of what it is that has taken place within the economy and the monetary policy and the politicians and their fiscal policy. All of that is geared and engineered to the top 10 to 20% of households. So, back in the day, when the drop in consumption would take place, it was happening at the working class individual. So what they would do is lower interest rates, Corporations would borrow money and hire people. Hiring people would get people to work. Working people would then spend money, spending money into the economy and supply demand imbalances, and they would find their inflationary pressures on account of it. That's the way it used to operate. So the working class individual is very important. When the consumer fell, that was the working class losing its job. So they said, hey, here's some jobs, go back to consuming. But now you go and get a bunch of jobs and you don't participate in the consumption. In order to make that happen, they have to focus in on the asset holders. They're the ones who are doing the consuming. So you're no longer part of the game, raising and lower the interest rates in order to have the job market get hot or cool or whatever. It's really more just to keep you pacified so that you have at least a job to go and get some money so that you can go and eat. But as far as participating in the consumption, increasing GDP, doing all that part, you're not the part that they focus in on. I mean, they could, but they would have to focus so hard on 70% of the people that most likely it's just not going to have the effect that they're hoping for by lowering interest rates and getting you to go to work. In fact, they've already proven that through the flattening of the Phillips curve and the Somme rule breaking down that this does it just doesn't work. They can lower interest rates, you go to work, it doesn't matter anymore, right? There was a time that mattered. Now they focus in on the top 20%, the top 10% of household incomes. Now, what is it that they can do to create asset valuation to go up? Get those people to have a return on their capital investments because they're the ones who are doing the consuming. And that's the unfortunate consequences of this now society that we live in. We're just not part of like the recession. I don't think is going to take place. Like we can lose our jobs, but the consuming will still happen, right? Because we're not doing it. They are. All right, greetings and happy new year from Detroit. Food processing plants will keep exploding and catching on fire. You need to buy copper by the ton to be profitable. What industries or companies do you think could get a bump on the stock market once millions of pounds Argentine beef starts moving this way every day? All right. Say hi to Axel Foley. Copper. I don't mean to just kind of graze over that, but I'm not. I don't know what's going to happen with a bunch of Argentine beef. I mean, it's like I I love how people would ask me what's going to happen with the 25% Canadian tariff on lumber, and I'm like nothing. Right? Nothing is going to happen. In fact, you're probably going to end up seeing lumber prices dump out because of the lack of demand. And then what do you see out there is people have no clue of what's happening with lumber, and they're still spreading misinformation, talking about how lumber prices are sticky and elevated and caused for problems within the housing market because of the tariffs on Canadian lumber. And I'm like, where in the world did they get that? That was completely made up. Like that's not even close to what's happening out there, but whatever. I mean, if that's what people choose to believe, then that's what they believe. I can't make people believe the truth. I've told the truth a million times here. People don't find that very popular. I can come out here with some superficial idea of what it is that's happening out here within the economy, and people love it. It's sad. You talk about how it is that you're going to lose everything and die, and those are the most popular videos. But if you want to spread some real good information about what it is that's happening with monetary policy through the speeches and the words of the Federal Reserve itself, it is so boring that nobody will pay attention to it. And I'm like, I get it now, right? It's not a matter of the truth, it's who tells the best story. And that's it. Mills are closing here in Canada like crazy. Yeah, they are. Claude, I have been reporting on that for a very long time. Like I have been reporting on mill closures and curtailments for well over a year and a half now. And it's coming to a serious issue when you think about the inventory levels that are out there. It's very depleted. There's not a lot. And although there's not a lot of demand, you're not going to notice the fact that there is a depleted lumber stockpile in production taking place right now. But soon as the demand picks up, when it does, if it does, some point in the future, you are going to find that there is not a lot of production. And because of all the mill shutdowns that have happened, ramping production back up is going to be a very difficult task that'll take some time. And depending on how big that demand is, lumber prices could find a quite elevated position in the future if that demand picks up. But I don't see it now. I don't see it happening now, and I don't anticipate it anytime in the near future. The market is doing great, but I still feel the burden. Things aren't good for the cost of living for average people. I don't know how they make it honest. Major debt, it will crumble eventually. Because bad news, negative stuff, new, get viewers on social media. Oh, absolutely, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. Bro, I am doing so well, I would never be cursing life. Look at you. All right. Very concerning. I sent you a video on Canadian mill closures. Yeah, it's bad, right? I mean, in what I find funny about it, and not funny, this isn't funny. What I find very interesting about it is the more I start researching through what it is that's happening here with the inequality, with the Cantillon effect, and the separation between the rich and the poor, when you think about lumber in itself, lumber is becoming a luxury item. And now it's not a luxurious item when you think about it. It's lumber. It's meant for building stuff, and that's really it. And really, the people who handle it the most are blue collar working class individuals who are putting structures together. But what is it that they're actually putting together? A luxurious item. It's not supposed to be luxury. A house isn't supposed to be a luxurious item. I agree.